We're going to get started in a little bit. Before we get started, I want to thank everybody for being here, spending their Friday afternoon, morning with us all here today. I really appreciate your time and your presence here. And just to kind of give a brief overview of how this is going to work. Again, this is a sort of a talk. Maybe you can even call it a secular sermon, if you will, where obviously titled Boundless Spirit, Limitless Power, Transcending Identity to Build a Better Tomorrow. And for me, this comes from a combination of places. I'm a PhD student at UT Austin. I'm a political psychologist, and I particularly focus a lot on my work on identity. And however, we see a lot of difficulty people are facing in the world, and a lot of conflict kind of based on this. And I hope in this talk to kind of speak to not only individually how we can work together, but also speak to a larger societal kind of issue and direction in which the world seems to be moving and going. The way this will kind of set up is that I'm going to start this invocation with a poem, maybe a brief guided meditation for a few minutes, maybe no more than 3 to 5 minutes. Then I'll go in and give my talk. It'll be about 20 to 25 minutes. I'll again kind of end it again in a guided meditation. And then we'll really be open up for collaboration discussion. I think the really big thing, whether you're coming here for Limicon, whether you know me personally, is really what I really enjoy is being able to collaborate with people, engage in dialogue so that everybody, when they leave here, feels like they got something that's beneficial to them. I know maybe some of you came to see me speak. Maybe some of you know who I am or not, but ultimately, I think the biggest benefit we can get from this discussion, from this presentation, is really from each other, not necessarily from me. And before I begin, I want to give a big thanks out to Claudia for helping me be part of this, really, and Maggie for introducing me to this conference called Limicon. I really appreciate you guys and your support throughout this, as well as Alia. She's been very helpful in helping me create this talk, and all the wonderful people here who have supported me along the way. And most foremostly, my mother. She's been somebody who has really been somebody who's united both being a servant, caring, and being there with people, actually being a healer as a nurse, but also seeing her fire and her spirit demonstrated in all the ways she acts. And so anything you see in me is a direct reflection of my mother and her spirit put in me. And I'm really thankful for my experience in my life. And without further ado, let's get this started. So the poem I'm reading from is from Rilke's Book of Hours, Love Poems to God. And this is in the first chapter called The Book of Monastic Life. The hour is striking so close above me, so clear, so sharp, that all my senses ring with it. I feel it now. There's a power in me to grasp and give shape to my world. I know that nothing has ever been real. Without my holding it, all becoming has needed me. My looking ripens things, and they come toward me to meet and be met. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around that primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still do not know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? So I invite everyone to come here with me to center themselves, if you will. Feel your breath come through your nose. Feel your body resting in your seat. Maybe your feet seated in a chair, feet on the floor. And be grateful for this presence we are all sharing here together. In every in-breath, there's a small pause before we breathe out. And after every out-breath, there's a small pause before we breathe in. As we notice the breath coming in and out, Can we notice too that silence between breaths? As we feel the coolness of the breath enter our nose and be warmed by our lungs inside our bodies. And as it comes out again through our nostrils, can we find that silent spaciousness in the breath, not just between the breath? Breathing, knowing. If you'll join me in taking one large breath in and a nice sigh out. I thank you for coming here with me today. You can open your eyes as we transition. And I hope that whatever I say speaks to you doesn't come from me, but rather is what's already known within you. I'm simply a reminder. So to begin with, I'll give a quote by Martin Luther King that I think really feels like it was geared towards today. Rather, it was initially put forth in 57. And this quote is, "Let nobody fool you. All the loud noises we hear today are nothing but the death groans of a dying system. The old order is passing away. The new order is coming into being. But whenever there is anything new, there are new responsibilities. As we think of this coming new world, we must think of the challenge that we confront and the new responsibilities that stand before us. We must prepare to live in a new world." And I believe that what Limicon is about really is finding ways for us to exist in this new world. How do we bring this new world into being? And many of you who have joined here are also, I know personally, are directly interested in how we can bring this new world to be. Whether you are a healthcare worker, a bureaucrat, a scientist, or you work within the economy like everybody else, as an insurance agent, or so forth, we all are recognizing something is shifting and changing the atmosphere we're facing here today. And that we feel things are getting spooky and weird in ways that it doesn't feel like it happened 20, 30, or even 40 years ago. And what Limicon has been really good about kind of describing and talking about the people and the people I've met and the various talks I've been to is really pointing out this meta crisis that we're in. And if you haven't familiar with the word meta crisis, it literally is just meta and crisis together, not to be confused with Facebook. But meta in the sense of this larger growing sense that in the past, when we've had economic crisis, or we've had famine, or we've had natural disasters, or we've had it like the pandemic Spanish flu of 1918, those are just one thing we're dealing with as a culture. It didn't feel like everything else was shifting. Even with civil rights, it felt like the main thing we're dealing with is this cultural movement to a new place. However, this time we're in feels like we're in compounding crises. Obviously, there's the climate crisis, there's rising economic inequality, there's democratic backsliding and decline. And also, there's this rising feeling of social isolation that is particularly unique in our age. And that leads us to really, I believe, is the foundation of how we're going to move forward, and maybe the foundation, the feeling of why these crises feel somewhat overwhelming and insurmountable. It's a meaning crisis. In my life, people from all fields, whether they're yoga teachers, whether they're political leaders, whether they're teachers, I'm sensing this feeling of nihilism and despair pervading throughout the culture. And there's different responses I'm seeing to this sort of despair, which if you sit in it rightfully, there's a need to feel the sadness of our age in some sense. But I'm seeing people tune out, relegate themselves to a kind of nihilistic whatever. I see people go the opposite way towards egoism, towards narcissism. Well, for many of us, and I'm a victim to this too, distraction, addiction, because it feels the weight of what's going on is too heavy to bear. And many of us who are in Limicon here, and many of us who are interested in making a better world, understand that we need to do something about what's happening. And usually what I hear is usually two types of movement, an inward movement and an outward movement. The outward movement is obvious. We need collective action to address the political and material crises we have today. For me, where I see it from my perspective alone is this idea or this sense that in order for us to solve the climate crisis, we're going to have to solve a whole bunch of other things to get there. In order for us to solve poverty, to solve economic inequality, to deal with the issues and the aging institutions we have democratically, it's not going to be a sort of charismatic leader taking us to a promised land. The problem is too vast for any one person to take on. One of my good friends constantly tells me a quote that she has been uh, kind of exposed to, saying, the next Buddha is not going to be a Buddha, it's going to be the Sangha. Or in a more secular way, the next leader is going to be us and the community. So it's very clear that we need to come together and work together in the various ways we have the ability to, whether it's as limited in our small, mundane lives, in our families and with our roommates, in our community, but also in the larger collective political sense, whether that's through activism, voting, and volunteering in every way we can. However, there's another movement on the inward, this inward introspection that is necessary. Because our capacity to change the world largely depends on our capacity to turn in. And this is absolutely necessary as well for us to be able to go forward as well. Because how many people have we seen and met, tried to make a world a better place and instead were menaces to society? We all know the very common quote, right? The path to heaven is paved with, like, path to hell, excuse me, is paved with good intentions. And so many times we do agree on collectively what we should do. And in the 60s, we saw a lot of this, right? Various cult movements, various spiritual movements, and how many of them ended up with a man being accused of doing all kinds of horrendous, heinous acts. So we understand too, the outward movement is not enough for us to be able to move forward because we're not clear what's happening within ourselves. We are liable to cause more harm than we would have if we just stayed by ourselves and did nothing. So there's a tension here. And in this tension, I quote Jiddu Krishnamurti, a spiritual philosopher of the 20th century, where he says, know yourself, for self-knowledge is the foundation of intelligence. And that intelligence is love. And love, in its essence, is compassion. So for us to begin this path towards a more compassionate, more inclusive society, it starts with knowing ourselves. And what is that knowledge? What is that inner light that we must understand and see into in order for us to have an understanding of this? My argument, and what I come here to show you today, is that for every single major political movement in the 20th century, whether we're talking about the civil rights movement, whether we're talking about the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, whether we're talking about the Indian independence movement, whether we're talking about the work in the abolition, all these leaders, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, in Vietnam with Thich Nhat Hanh, Mandela and Desmond Tutu, and also in our own, in the South here, Fannie Lou Hamer. And in Europe, during the great crisis of World War II, Simone Weil, all these leaders were able to access something deep within themselves, what Meister Eckhart would call the ground of being, what some would call the inner fire or inner light. This is something we must connect to if we're going to access the power that our forefathers and mothers were able to access in order to take us to the new place. We're oftentimes inundated with the overwhelming nature of what's going on today. But in all honesty, with all due respect, does not come close to what the civil rights movement leaders went through, what the men, women, and children went through to have simple, basic civil rights. There is a question whether our civil rights are being eroded or what the future next 4 or 5 years will look like. I mean, I studied the insurrection, right? That's something we haven't seen since even before the 20th century. And so there's a question, are we experiencing a backsliding? Yes, there's evidence to suggest that. But are we yet there? Is there still time? Absolutely. So we should not lose focus. We should not lose heart. For Emerson says, when the universal soul breathes through a person's intellect, that itself is genius.
When it breathes through their will, that itself is virtue. When it flows through their affection, that itself is love. This power is available to us right here and right now, only if we let go of this smaller sense of self, this idea of our identity. We have an inner fire, an inner light that we all have access to in this very moment. We understand and see this is what brought us here today. This is what's motivated your own passion, your own wrestling with the difficulty of our age. What led you through your dark nights of the soul, through your very painful, lonely moments, and to see on the other side to help those you love and care about the most. I have no doubt every single person here understands what it is I'm speaking to. This dwells in the heart, but our ego, whether social or individual, covers this light. My mother used to make us sing a song growing up talking about this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I don't want to turn this into a choir session, but as a kid, you felt that. You see children run around in this light, unencumbered, free, brilliant. And Emerson has a quote to talk about this too. The 20th century, the 19th and 20th century philosopher, speaker who actually influenced Thoreau and the nonviolence. This is all connected. And in this quote, he says, let each person learn that all of nature and all thought are revealed through the heart. This, namely, the highest dwells within, that the sources of nature are found in one's own mind, if the spirit of duty is present. But if one wishes to know what the great divine speaks, they must go into solitude and close the door as Jesus taught. The divine will not reveal itself to the fearful. One must listen deeply to their own soul, withdrawing from the echoes of others' devotions. And how many echoes do we feel when we open up TikTok, when we open up Instagram, when we look at the news, when we try and be informed citizens? How many opinions do we get inundated with about how there's no hope left? The doomerism, right? The absolute gloomerism of our age, that there's no hope. You should leave the country, that it's already bad here. I'm sorry, my brothers and sisters. If it's bad here, it's going to be bad everywhere else. I'm telling you that right now. So how do we open up this light within us? How do we let our true light shine? The issue is when we cling to these identities, we wall off our spirit. And so I'll take you through a bit of an academic exercise I give to my students when I talk about identity. What really is an identity, right? If you really think about it, right? Think about whatever identity you have. I'll use mine as an example. I'm a man, I'm Black, I'm Nigerian, I'm Texan, right? All these things are constantly in me, right? But what is that really? What does it mean to be Black really for me? It's a label attached to a number of experiences, memories. The first memory I realized I was Black was in kindergarten. We were playing the color matching game. And so in the class, they would point to saying, oh, look, what is that? What color is that? Blue. We point to the sky. Oh, what color is the carpet? It's green. We point to the green, like the carpet. Then it says, where's brown at? And then they all turned towards me and said, God's will. And I was like, what? I was like, no, you guys. And then I realized, oh, something's different here. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on here? That was the first moment I realized I was, we were different in some way. But that means that before that moment, I didn't have a sense of identity of being Black. I was just me. But after that moment, something was crystallized. And with my students, I use another example. When you're like a ninth grader entering into high school, you are ended up feeling, scared, right? You're barely going through puberty and you see these grown ass men and women walking around, right? You go into the cafeteria, like the what do you call it? The jocks, the nerds, the choir kids, all these different groups here, right? Like the debate kids, right? And you're just kind of like overwhelmed, confused, and scared, right? But over time, as we all went through our high school experience, we notice and see, oh, wait a minute. I kind of like playing soccer. And I don't really like how I feel dumb around the debate kids. They just want to make me feel small. But I do like the feeling of being popular, right? Like I scored a goal last week and it made me feel good. And so what happens is that we sort through these experiences based on two different poles, whether it was positive or negative. And I guarantee you, very few of us, unless for very few exceptions, we develop identities based on the positive feeling it gives us. And so when this happens, there's a moment. Maybe when you go to the school dance and you get like the what is it, the sash or I forgot. In Texas, you have these big mums you wear, right? With your the indication what your extracurricular was, right? So for me with football, right, I had that on my sleeve, and I was like, oh my goodness, I was a nerd my whole life, but now I'm like popular. I'm a football player. Boom, the identity is now finally crystallized. But let's go back to what that is. As fun as that may be, as cool as and harmless as that may be, identity is the root of the violence we see today. Of every single conflict we see within our nation, across the world, identity is at the basis of it. It is the us versus them, right? The in-group love and the out-group hate. But if the identity of a simple high schooler being a football player and the identity of two ethnic groups at war are ultimately made of the same thing, we have to understand what this is so that we can peer through and break open from that so our light may shine, so we may access this divine power within us. And the question is how? Again, identity is simply a label attached to our memories of an experience. But what really is a memory made out of? Thoughts. And what are thoughts really made out of? Thoughts usually are an image in our heads, right? Maybe some visual movement, right? A movie in our heads, an image in our head, combined with some sort of narrative about it. Fundamentally, outside of maybe more what I'll call proto thoughts or intimations, right? A baby wanting to eat, right? Moving towards the bottle. Outside of these, the most complex thoughts that really are at the basis of our identity. These thoughts themselves are just simply images and narrative or words in our heads. And so what I tell my students to do, and you can join me in this if you like, but what I tell my students typically to do is to close their eyes and imagine a giant pink elephant, right? Name the elephant. Charlie. That's what I did. Maybe he has a little hat. Maybe he's furry. You know, elephants have hair. Or maybe he's nice and bald. Is it an Indian elephant? Is it an African elephant? And then I say, okay, now you got the elephant. Now hold that image in your head as long as you can. I'm like, hold it. Hold it. If you notice and you look closely, it's shimmering. Maybe some of us who have particularly good internal visualization are able to hold it longer, but even then, it's not as real as what you're looking at right now, as your feeling of your body here right now. It's kind of ephemeral. And so if you look closely, we notice too that my blackness, for example, I may feel that when I go home or when I'm in a space where I'm the only one there. But most of the time I'm driving my car to work. I'm playing sports. I'm not thinking about that. So if I'm not actively aware of this identity, is that really me? And if we look closely throughout our day, there'll be moments in time where certain identities come to be and come out of being, right? And we have this experience when you realize, like, oh, wow, like this is a space where I may not be included based on whatever it may be. In high school, obviously, right? When you walk into the wrong homeroom and you realize, like, oh, like this is they don't like me and I don't like them. But this also aspect of identity applies to other identities that we feel are more tangible, more real, that we as human beings have fought over for over a millennia. So we see that identity in some sense is ephemeral. It comes in and goes out. And if we're able to notice this, we're able to see this happen, then the thing that's watching this is more essential than the identities we see come and go. And if we look even closer to the personal identity, really the bedrock of identity, the sense of me, the sense of ego. When we look close, we also notice if we look really close, maybe through meditation practice, maybe in silence, maybe if you just watch through your day, those moments where you're looking at the trees on a beautiful summer night, the sense of you only comes up when the narrative of you comes up, when the application of labels to form come up. So this is not, again, a philosophy lecture. I'm not necessarily interested in ontology or epistemology of being or non-being, but I'm really interested in the felt feeling of that. If we rest and see this happen, we develop an awareness to understand, oh, when somebody said this to me, this triggered me personally, or this made me upset because it was an insult to my family. I remember watching a documentary of the Rwanda genocide in high school, and some kids started laughing during one of the very horrific scenes. And I went, I saw, you see, it's in like, I went red. I saw red. I remember just screaming, yelling, and they're like, "Oh no, we just shared a meme. It was just a meme, bro. It was just a meme. I wasn't laughing at the movie." Then I realized, like, oh, wait a minute. I was ready to whoop some ass, but I didn't really understand what was going on there. But the reason why I did is because immediately the identity came into being. And so we understand that if we are able to watch this happen, we have some space to make decisions. And this is what I'm arguing us to do and asking us all to do is to move beyond this identity. When we let go of identity, it's not letting go of it or abandoning it. It's not to say identity is bad. We already see in the growing child, it's an important part of our development. There's a beauty in culture. There's a beauty in the various identities we face. Even like identities that right now may not necessarily seem as beautiful, right? People oftentimes talk about whiteness in a negative way. I see my homies at Irish, what do you call it? The Irish Day, right? I forgot the name of it actually, right? When they're really like, this is who you are, enjoy this. Or like Midwestern Chile, enjoy that. That's your culture, right? There's beauty in all of this. However, when we cling to this and we see these tools or these parts of us as more essential than who we are, St. Patrick's Day, thank you. St. Patrick's Day, excuse me. See, I don't understand. I'm not familiar with the culture as well as I should be. But when we see this happen, we understand there's something more essential to us because we were once before that in our conscious understanding, and there was a day after that, and we will die. Sorry to break it to her, but we will die and it will be beyond us. It will go beyond us. There's something more essential to our being. The idea of we all know about the high school football player who's talking about how, oh my God, like they're 50 years old talking about how great the championship of 1986 was. My brother in Christ, you're 65 years old. Please let go of it. And you can see in various our lives, we could all have imaginations and examples of our own of how these identities really limit the people we care and love, and maybe some of the reason why we don't like other people. And so, as funny as this may be, as amusing as it may be, and as cool it may be, we have to understand that the light within us shines not because of identity, but shines through it. Identity is simply the lens we use to see the world. The light that shines through, that enables perception itself, dare I say consciousness, being, awareness, that is the most fundamental. So in this talk or in the label, I talked about this limitless power. How do we access that? How do we go beyond the limitation of identity and access the fire within us? Again, we just go back to the people who've done it already, who've been able to do both understanding what they are essentially and be able to actually move forward and use that to make the world a better place. In doing so, what we're able to do, we're able to see is that collective liberation happens when we can see beyond the self, when we can actually engage in selfless action. Think about that. Selfless action means something cannot be there. The self, the ego. That's when we can truly be free, truly be compassionate, when we can be assured that when we help somebody, when we volunteer, when we serve, there's not that little bit of how does this serve me? For Christ used to say, because I come from the Christian tradition, that when we pray, but we pray outside and make a whole big deal about it, you already got your reward there. The idea when we give and we should make a big show about it, you already got what you benefited there. But the benefit and the beauty of giving without self, of letting go of the attachment to how this serves me, how this serves my group, let go of the me and mine, then there's a true capacity. And I showed this particularly through what the Martin Luther King was able to do in the Montgomery bus boycott. I think it's one of the most beautiful examples of this. For Martin Luther King used to say, through violence, you may murder a hater, but you can't murder hate. Darkness cannot put out darkness. Only light can do that. And if we look at the Montgomery bus boycott, it is brilliant. Obviously, we've analyzed this historically in terms of Martin Luther King and his involvement, of the leaders, of the political strategy, of its importance. But what tends to be neglected is the space from where it came from. If you think about this, you had a whole city, not just MLK, a whole city of men, of women, of children, all taking sacrifices, each to their own ability, to their own accord, what they could do through love by itself. Because if you think about it, just think to your own experience. I think I'll use an example for myself. When my mom would threaten me to like take away something or punish me for something, I'll do it, but I'm gonna be like, whatever, dog. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna go like do the least amount, right? When your boss is kind of like, if you don't do this, I don't know what your boss, I don't think your boss may not sound like this, but this is the boss in my head. If you don't do this, you're gonna get a pip or whatever it may be, right? And you're just kind of like, man, this dude is on my ass, right? Like it doesn't feel good. Then think about something when you were working with somebody on a team, maybe in sports, when you guys are all bought in, where the goal transcends yourself alone. You're doing it for the team. This is a mundane example. We're not even talking about activism. I'm just talking about when I played sports. Or when you're doing a game night and your team really wants to win because you want to get that Amazon gift card for $25 and the bragging rights, you're locked in. You're ready to go. And so we see in these mundane examples how when we let go of ourselves and beyond bring something bigger than ourselves, even if it's a five-person trivia team on Wednesday nights at a bar, right? We see the benefit that happens there. How much more so we see in moments where life and death matters. In the Montgomery bus boycott, we had grandmothers who had to take the bus because they had arthritis in their ankles and knees, their joints, working as maids in the houses of the people who were oppressing them, deciding to take on that pain and walk because it was bigger than them. It was for their children. It was for their future. And it was even bigger than Montgomery itself. It was for the nation. We have students bust in by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, coming out of town, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, risking literally their lives. Because many of them died in the Freedom Summer on the way through in Mississippi. They knew what was at stake, and they still showed up, marching daily, getting beaten daily, while Martin Luther King was in jail. Think about even the children. There are stories of children understanding their parents were doing something that they didn't really get, but you know what? Maybe I need to do my chores today, really, like for real, for real. Let me try and be a better kid, whatever that meant. Each person, to their own ability and to their own extent, sacrificed more than themselves because it wasn't about themselves. This nonviolent strategy that we talk about and analyze, I'm not immune to this. I'm a political scientist. We look at it and break down and use all kinds of ways to like case study analysis. This wasn't something that was top down. It was emergent. It came through the shared being that these people shared, where they were able to act truly selflessly. And if we look at all these movements, not just the Montgomery bus boycott, not just what happened in India and the nonviolence movement, not just the anti-apartheid movement when Mandela spent over 20 years in prison, and when he left, had not a single revengeful bone in his body. I don't know about you, but even when somebody like talks to me crazy on the street or flicks me off, when driving, sometimes I go crazy. So imagine the level of selflessness that has to happen, the lack of concern for oneself in order for this to occur. So what is the path forward? How can we access this wellspring of power within us? How can we widen the circles of our being so that we don't become Emil, the founder of metamodernism, talks about the yoga bourgeoisie, right? These people who are all about, let me just meditate, let me just like do my thing and not necessarily engage with the world. How do we avoid also going out and protesting for things we believe in, but also then maybe causing harm because we're coming from a place of hate, from a place of in-group, out-group, from face of other? One of my students in one of my classes I taught in the Identity American Politics course, one time in class, like true story, like we're talking about in-group, out-group violence. And he goes, what if the other group's just fucking evil? And I said, hey, yo, this is a class. You can't be talking like that. But after that, I said, okay, let's say they are evil and you treat them that way. If somebody treats you like you're evil, what are you going to do? Treat them the same way. Violence begets violence. Hate begets hate. We take eye for an eye until the whole world is blind. Martin Luther King and others understood what this strategy was. If we look at all these movements, people who had less resources, less access to power, less access to economic resources, minorities in every single sense of the way, where like apartheid to Africa, white South Africans held like 90% of the land or something like that. Where you have in India, with the British Empire at its height, maybe not so much anymore, but at its height, really left India at the peak of its power. And the civil rights movement, African Americans have never been more than 12 to maybe 20% of the population throughout our history. How did this happen? Because there's something greater here than what is in the world. And so when we are able to access and clear out the debris of ego, clear out the debris of identity, and access this space within us, we can actually engage in selfless service. And when we engage in selfless service, we're engaging in love. When we're engaging in love, we're engaging that fire within our beings. Because at that point, we're acting on our own regard. We're not doing it for somebody else. We're not doing it because of the outcome. The process by which we get there is the same as the outcome. Moment by moment, step by step, we move in a direction towards freedom. We move in a direction towards greatness. We pave the path to the city of freedom that we all deserve to live in. So the question then remains, how are we going to do this? How do we actually get to do this? So many times I go to talks and I'm like, okay, then what's next though? The question I'll ask you guys is not necessarily what should I do? I think a lot of really smart people, everybody in this chat included, has thought really deeply at what we should do. But the question isn't what we should do, but am I ready to become a vessel? Am I ready to allow a whole other type of energy and power to flow through me? Am I willing to let go of my thoughts, my conceptions, the way I see the world, and just be present with people and see them where they are? That means seeing people for what they are, whether they're coming from a racist place, whether they're ignorant of the beauty and the benefits of democracy, whether they don't know what it means to be an immigrant or a first generation person. Are we willing to stand in that fire and burn and allow the parts of us burn until there's no more left? And all that's left is our ability to open up. And now there's another conversation about how to also take care of ourselves, how to also ensure that we're not giving beyond ourselves. It's the same action, the same place. It's having our own center. Because when we're centered in this place, we give to the natural limit, not beyond it. When we oftentimes, at least in my experience, burn out, work beyond, it's because of a lot of shoulds. I should do this, I should do that. This needs to happen, that needs to happen. When we let go of this, we're able to move from a place of real power and depth that also takes care of us as well. And so to close out my talk, I like to lead us in a more experiential understanding of what it is we're talking about. For us to actually access this place of being that rests in all of us, regardless of ideology, regardless of party, regardless of identity. The same space from which all of us are able to witness right now. I want to end in a small invocation, a small guided meditation or prayer. So if you're willing to join me to come back to where we started to come back into our breath, to rest in our body, to not only observe the breath, our seat in our chair, our feet on the floor, but to also gradually be aware of the thoughts coming through our minds. There may be a lot of things going on. What you're going to do tomorrow? What the heck did I just listen to? What your weekend plans are going to be? What your question or comment is going to be? Notice as these thoughts come and go. What is the space from which they come and go? Where does the thought come from? Where does it go? Is this space separate from my breath? Is this the same space between the breath? The in-breath, the pause, and the out-breath. Resting and grounding in ourselves. Recognizing we can connect to this spacious ground of love, always, at any time. All that's needed is one breath. And to close out, take one big inhale and one large exhale. And I'd like to thank everybody for being part of this. I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate your presence. And now this is just open for us to have discussion. If you have any questions for me, please go ahead and like raise your hand or unmute yourself. And hopefully we can move into some dialogue and share this space together. We have it until 12:30. So again, I really appreciate your time. And afterwards, I'll put my contact information if you want to reach out to me or you want to have more conversations like this and how we individually can step out into our own worlds and find out the very small ways, whether that's helping the person next to us in our house, like in our streets, volunteering in a soup kitchen, being a mentor. There's no one way. One of my good friends, Juan, to tell me protest is not limited to being in the streets. Protest is really an act that comes from the heart. So thank you again. And so if you guys want to talk, let's talk.